So the feed is in the page on Facebook, right?
Mm-hmm. Starting. Go ahead.
I must say that we are so pleased to be with you. We are so pleased that you have chosen in this difficult time to be ready to gather together to give solace to our community. And we are live on YouTube. It is wonderful that we are able to do that. I'm hoping that we'll be live on Facebook in just a moment. And I will say to you that it is important for our community to gather together. It is important for our community to give solace to each other in these troubling times. At these times when we see so many of us, so many black and brown people making their transition to ancestors, at a time when even sometimes their families are not able to be with them in their last moments. Even at times where we see the numbers racking up, I have noticed that as I see these important members of our community become ancestors, one of the things that has been happening is sometimes I'll have friends say that they've lost their parents. What a horrible thing to experience. And they don't tell us why their parents have made their transition. This is a confusing time. This is a difficult time. This is the kind of moment when people can lose themselves. And so we are honored that you have joined us. We truly feel that it is important in times like this for us to gather together, more important than in normal times. And we welcome you to Kemetic Ascension for April 12th, 2020. So I want to say to you as we begin that we are honored to be here, and in many ways I must say that the Shrine of Ma'at was perhaps better positioned than other spiritual institutions to weather this storm. And I say that because much of what we do has always or very early been done online. Much of what we do. We have been broadcasting Kemetic Ascension live on Facebook for, I believe it's been 4 years now, 4 years. And so we always believed that we were going to communicate to a global community of Africans who hear the ancient call of our ancestors, who hear the ancient call of the Neteru, those divine forces that were described by our African Kemetic ancestors. And so we, I believe, were well prepared to be able to be speaking to you online. And so we are going to continue to do that even though we do not have people in-house. That does not matter. Distance cannot prevent us from gathering. Distance cannot prevent us from calling the name of the divine forces that are indwelling and outdwelling. Distance cannot prevent us from giving solace to our community. So we are honored that you have joined us. We are honored that you are with us. We are honored that you have chosen to be part of the Shrine of Ma'at family at this difficult time. And so we stand here really communicating with you via Facebook and YouTube. And we are asking that you participate with us. Please don't think that Kemetic Ascension is theater. This is not a time for you to simply watch us on your phone, watch us on your computer screen. We're expecting that you will do Hesse with us. We are expecting that you will pray with us. We are expecting that you, as you will see in a little while, will build an ancestor altar to remember those people who have made their transition. So, you know that as we do Kemetic Ascension, we must begin with that ritual that marks our shrine, with that ritual that was brought into existence by our elder, Baba Heru Ankh Ra Samad Sepata. Now I'm going to say to you that Baba Heru is the one that created this ritual, but he created it in complete congruence with the symbols, with the worldview, with the cosmology of our ancient Kemetic ancestors. It is in many ways a modern ancient ritual. A modern ancient ritual. And in that instance, I believe that it comes at us at a higher resonance than the things that perhaps we would create on our own. And so before we do the opening of the way, I must say dua to our elder, Baba Heru, for being steadfast, for continuing to guide us for more than 50 years, for being our elder, for being one of those individuals who has been consistent. I truly believe that consistency perhaps is one of the most important traits. And so as we thank Baba Heru, as we recognize our elder, please stand for us to do the opening of the way. Anika, are you going to come forward and do it with me? Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So, you know that you are standing in the position of adoration. You are standing with your left foot forward, with your right foot slightly back behind your left foot. You are going to stand with your palms exposed in front of you. The left hand is going to be a little bit forward than the right hand. Remember, our ancestors believed that the left side of your body was symbolic of that which gives. And the right side of your body was symbolic of that which receives. And so, as we stand with our palms exposed, we will both give divine energy and receive divine energy, creating a divine sacred circuit that will allow our energy to connect the members of our community worldwide. So, we begin with the divine sound of everlasting life. Take your breath.
Anetrak in Bethet.
Anetrak in Bethet.
Nuke in Bethet.
Nuke in Bethet. Anetrak Hapi.
Anetrak Hapi.
Nuke Hapi.
Nuke Hapi.
Twa Winter.
Twa Winter.
Turn to your right.
Anetrak Serket.
Anetrak Serket.
Nuke Serket.
Nuke Serket. Anetrak Kebsenuf.
Anetrak Kebsenuf.
Nuke Kebsenuf.
Nuke Kebsenuf.
Twa Inter.
Twa Winter. Anetrak Ast.
Anetrak Ast.
Nuke Ast.
Nuke Ast. Anetrak Amset.
Anetrak Amset.
Nuke Amset.
Nuke Amset.
Twa Winter.
Twa Winter. Anetrak Neat.
Anetrak Neat.
Nuke Neat.
Nuke Neat. Anetrak Dwamutef.
Anetrak Dwamutef.
Nuke Dwamutef.
Nuke Dwamutef.
Twa Winter.
Twa Winter. Anetrak Newt.
Anetrak Newt.
Nuke Newt.
Nuke Newt. Anetrak Geb.
Anetrak Geb.
Nuke Geb.
Nuke Geb.
Twa Winter.
Twa Winter.
Anetrak Shu.
Shoo.
Nuke Shu. 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 Nuke Shu.
Anetrak Tefnut.
Anetrak Tefnut.
Tefnut.
Tefnut. Tefnut. Tefnut. Nuke Tefnut. Twa Winter. Anetrak Paut Interu. Nuke Paut Interu. Anetrak Mbu Interu. Nuke Mbu Interu. Twa Winter. Dwa winter. Dwa, 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 dwa. I truly hope that you were not simply watching. I truly hope that you recognize that it's important for you to do the opening of the way with us. I want to say to you once more that the opening of the way is the ceremony that recognizes the divine self, that recognizes the very power that is within you. And because it recognizes the power that is within you, you should be able to actually do this ceremony whenever you are doing something important. I have always said that while it seems that we are beset with so many challenges, so many issues, in fact, the greatest challenge, the only real challenge, is the challenge of disempowerment. Imagine how difficult it would be if you were actually going about your day and someone had told you, incorrectly by the way, someone had told you that you did not have the use of your legs. That in fact, not only did you not have the use of your legs, but you also did not have the resources to even get a wheelchair. Imagine how challenging your day would be. Imagine how you would often see people who had the use of their legs just pass you in the street, reach things that might be difficult for you to reach. Imagine what your day would look like. Now imagine if you were told by someone who sought to truly put you in contact of your faculties that your legs in fact work. Imagine how your day would be different. Imagine how some of the things that you might have seen as obstacles would disappear. Now imagine that they not just tell you that you have legs, but you in fact have wings. If you are able to recognize your absolute divine power, most of your challenges will seem minute. And so it is of critical importance for us to recognize just how powerful we are. To recognize that we are the stuff of the stars. In fact, we are made of the same things, the same materials as the stars. And so if you actually recognize how powerful you actually are, none of the challenges that are before you are insurmountable. And so the opening of the way reminds you, as we go towards the cardinal points, the opening of the way reminds you that you are the cardinal points. As we recognize those in and outdwelling forces that protect your divine organs, you recognize that they are the cardinal points. You recognize that they are you. And in fact, there is nothing that is beyond you. If you come into your divine spiritual power, you will be able to do many, many, many things. If you come into your divine spiritual power, you will be able to surmount all of those things that seemed once surmountable. You will be able to contend with those things that seemed at once uncontendable. You will be able to have victory over those things that seemed like they were only prepared in front of you for failure. And so it is of critical importance for you to do the opening of the way. And so we once again say Dwa to our shrine elder. In fact, he is not just our shrine elder. We say he's our shrine elder because we want to remind people of our close relationship with this elder that in many ways is the elder for the Kemetic community in the West and in the world. Earlier than virtually anyone else, he was the one that said that we should not just be reading, we should not just be learning history, but in fact what we should be doing is living once more the legacy of our ancient Kemetic ancestors. And so I want to say to him, Dwa, Dwa, Dwawu. So, we have done our opening of the way. You know that this is the time that we go into Hesse. And I think Anika can articulate the fact that I woke up this morning. By the way, you should know that when I try to prepare some of what we do, some of what we prepare to bring to you, it can sometimes be difficult because I truly believe that it is of critical importance for me to be able to speak to you in a manner that is helpful for you. Speak to you in a manner that allows you to draw energy for the 2 weeks that we will not be meeting. And so sometimes that feels like a burden. It feels difficult. I wonder sometimes if I'm up to the task. And I think it's very interesting that sometimes I'll be thinking all week, what should I actually cover in Kemetic Ascension? And so I woke up this morning, and as is often the case, it was clear to me this morning. Not clear to me yesterday, not clear to me Friday, not clear to me Thursday, but clear to me this morning. I literally scrapped part of what I had been thinking about earlier in the week. And not only was the word from the Sibayit clear to me, but now all of a sudden it became clear that I needed to construct a new Hesse. Now, some of you may know that I actually think I'm developing some proficiency in constructing Hesse, but I'm not exactly the kind of person that should sing the Hesse. And so I know that that is challenging for me, but I also know that it is important at this time for me to do all that I can to speak to our community in power. So I constructed a new Hesse, and hopefully the Neteru will allow the air to fill my lungs. Those of you who are part of this community know that Jabari has overcome the novel coronavirus, has overcome COVID-19. And so in this condition, I realize that I'm still not 100%, but every day I'm growing incrementally towards 100%. And so there are some times, as you just heard me cough, there are some times that my lungs remind me that they're still healing. And so I am asking the Neteru to fill my lungs with air so that I may provide this Hesse to you to assist you in your healing going forward. And so what we did is we attempted to create a Hesse to help us at this particular time. You know that we are beset with the coronavirus. Please, in the chat room, tell us how being on lockdown, tell us how so many people who have been ill at this time in our community has affected you. Tell us where you are, and tell us how this time has affected you. I want you to also recognize that in this difficult time, what would a practitioner of the Kemetic spiritual sciences do? What would someone who practices the ancient machinations of Kemetic power do? One of the things that we would certainly do is come together in Hesse. And so I felt that it was important for me not simply to do a Hesse that is one that we've created already, but to try to do a Hesse that would speak to healing in the era of COVID-19. And so you know that we look at the divine forces, the Neteru, as in many ways personal powers that we can use for particular purposes. And so in this instance, I actually am calling the names of particular members of the Neteru, particular members that are particular to healing, that will help us in healing and will also assist us with drawing breath. And so this Hesse is one that we have created specifically for this purpose. I've even said to Anika, although you know, if you've watched these sessions, if you are a close part of the Shrine of Ma'at family, you know that sometimes I say something and Anika looks at me like I'm a little crazy, right? It happens often. If you have been one of those individuals who has even been in the room, you've probably seen it live. I'll say something and Anika will look at me like this. What did you just say? Now I'm going to say to you that I have been divinely paired. So even though I say things that sometimes are grandiose, my queen doesn't say, Negro, you out of your mind. What she actually says is, if that is what you want to do, how do we do it? Not how you going to do it. How do we do it? And so I will say to you that we will be in a very short period, perhaps in a few days, maybe a week. Anika and I will be going to the Kemetic in Central Park to do this Hesse live. We will tell you when we will do it. And perhaps even if there are times that are best for you on lockdown at home, you should suggest when we might do it. But we will tell you when we will go to the Tekken, go to that device that was created by our Kemetic ancestors, and actually together as a community, we will ask for the healing of our community. And one of the things we will do is this Hesse. So let's talk about what this Hesse is. First of all, before I even do that, I've been using the word because I know I'm speaking to the choir, speaking to those individuals who actually are part of the Kemetic legacy. But I want to ask you, what is Hesse? Answer that question in the chat. What is Hesse? Hesse is usually spelled in English H-E-S-I or H-E-S-Y. Please don't argue about whether it should be an I or a Y. Recognize that we are approximating the sounds of the Kemetic language in English letters. And so Hesse, I'm hoping that you are typing, Hesse is divine chanting. Hesse is divine song. Hesse can also be called, perhaps you'll hear the term affirmation a lot today. In the Eastern world, the Asian world, one of the words that you will hear is mantra. That is Hesse. I want you to recognize that your ancestors put forth Hesse in writing before anyone else put forth Hesse in writing. And so you know today, as you see Africans, even in the Christian church, absolutely going into transcendent worship of the divine in moments when we are in gospel. Understand one of the reasons why I would argue that we are able to do that is because we have always done it. And the Kemetic prevalence of Hesse is the reason why we can prove that to you. So, what is the Hesse that we're coming forward with today? It begins with a plead to our ancestor, to the Neteru, the divine powers. It starts with Intera Iau, which means something to the effect of divine entity, great divine entity, we give you praise. That's the first line. And then it goes into De Nefet Jedu. De means something like give us. Nefet, perhaps, is one of the most important words in this Hesse with regard to the time that we are in today. Nefet is one of the words for breath. You know that COVID-19 is a respiratory condition, a respiratory ailment. You know that that means primarily that it will steal your ability to breathe. That is the reason why it is so dangerous. Because the breath perhaps is the most important thing that we have. Some of you have heard of something called the rule of threes. It essentially means that if you look at the number 3, it's very interesting that you need air, you need shelter, and you need sustenance. And so you can actually live without sustenance for about 3 months. You can actually live without shelter in very inclement conditions for about 3 days. And you can actually live without the air for about 3 minutes. So you can see that your breath perhaps is one of the most important portions, one of the most important things that you can actually receive. In fact, you know that just with a few moments without air, all of the most important organs will fail. And so the breath is most important. You will see images of divine forces. You will see images of our Kemetic ancestors. And you will see the divine image giving them the ankh, the image of divine life to their nose. So the breath is of critical importance. So the line here in the Hesse is D-E, give us, Nefet, breath, Jedu. And Jedu means eternal. It means everlasting. It means, I'm sorry?
Stability.
Stability. Mm-hmm. But, and so it means like, Jed is usually called stability, but it's also considered to be something that, if something is stable, it means that it exists throughout all trials and tribulations. So we're talking about something that is eternal in this sense. Something that that cannot be destroyed. That's what we mean when we say stability in this instance. So, D-E, Nefet, Jedu. And then the refrain is, Sekhmet, Imhotep, Sekhmet, Shu'a Intef, Sekhmet, Imhotep, Sekhmet, Shu'a Intef, and Sekhmet Imhotep. We are calling on the divine force of Sekhmet. Sekhmet is a divine healer. You will see her depicted as a lioness with the sun on her head. As a lioness with the sun on her head. And so she is an image of divine healing. So we're calling on Sekhmet, and then we call on an entity that was actually, he was actually a living person. But as one of the first recorded doctors, he is considered by many to be a deity of healing. And so we're also calling the name of Imhotep. And then we call the name of another entity, Sekhmet Shu'a Intef. Now you know that in the opening of the way, we call on Shu. Shu is the elemental force of the wind. Shu is the force of oxygen. And so we are saying Shu'a in this instance means great, and Intef in this instance means father. So we're asking for the great father of the wind to come to us. So this particular Hesse was created to allow those individuals, our individuals in our community, to receive the breath. And so that is the Hesse. So let me go through it again. It begins with Inter-A-Iau. Inter-A-Iau. And then D-E Nefet Jedu. We're going to say that 3 times. And then Sekhmet Imhotep, Sekhmet Shu'a Intef. We're going to say that 3 times. That's the refrain as well. Okay? So, Usually we have our Hesse masters hooking it up and making it sweet for us. But you know that because we are distant, some of that is a little different as well. Do we have some of our Hesse masters in the room?
I didn't see them yet.
Okay. I also am wondering if we have lots of individuals joining us live on YouTube and live on Facebook. Please don't just sit there looking at us. We are doing this together, so please make sure you let us know where you are. So let's throw this down. Now remember, this is the first time we're doing this. I created this just a little while ago because I was inspired by the Neteru to create a Hesse for healing of COVID-19, healing of the novel coronavirus. So here we go. Intera iau di na fed jedu di na fed jedu di na fed jedu Sekmet imhotep, sekmet shua intef, 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 di-fe jedu. Na fe jedu di na fe jedu sekmet imhotep sekmet shua intef 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 di neferu. I switch it up on you. Di nefer jedu di nefer jedu sekmet imhotep sekmet shua intef 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 di nefer jedu di nefer jedu neferu sekmet imhotep sekmet shua intef sekmet imhotep sekmet shua intef sekmet imhotep sekmet shua intef sekmet imhotep sekmet shua intef. Last time. Di nefer jedu di nefer jedu di nefer Sekhmet Shua Intef, Sekhmet Imhotep, Sekhmet Shua Intef, I really want you, when you are struggling, when you are challenged, when you are beset, put a song in your soul. And I know so well that sometimes what ends up happening is you revert to the traditions that you are running from. There is no need to do that. Use your creativity, African. By the way, Hesse does not need to be in the Kemetic language. If we speak English, there is nothing wrong with you creating Hesse in English. Go ahead and be creative. When you go to the church, you don't say, how come they're not speaking Hebrew? How come they're not speaking Greek? Yes, Greek is one of the languages that... Anyway, we'll go into that. You don't say that when you're in church. You should be comfortable creating in a language that is meaningful to you, in a language that is familiar to you, as well as using the ancient Kemetic language. So we really hope that we have inspired you to create. Because if you have a Hesse in your soul, it will allow you to move forward in power. And so I hope that you enjoyed that, even with Jabari's limited vocal range. I hope that you enjoyed that and that you are prepared. I'm hoping that no one is texting those eyes. You know those eyes that go to the side like this? What is he doing? I believe that I'm becoming more and more proficient every day at creating Hesse, but definitely I'm passing this on to our Hesse masters to make it sweet, make it hot, baby. Come on now. I know that you will do that. And as we continue to hear this, we're going to hear it beautifully from those individuals who have been given those gifts from the Neteru.
They're just very happy that you're back with them.
Oh, okay. So they're just saying, look, oh, okay, even if he's singing off key, we're happy that he's still alive. I must say that I am so pleased to be before you. I actually have more energy than the last Kemetic Ascension. I think I was back for the last Kemetic Ascension, was I? I think I was. Was I?
I don't think so.
No?
I think that's when the Abut did it.
Is that when the Boot did it?
The Wenwet did it. And then after that we had initiation. You were back for initiation.
Oh, so is this the first Kemetic? Listen, in the era of COVID-19, I am sure that even if you are not ill, you are missing your confusing days. Because being at home on lockdown means that sometimes Tuesday feels exactly the same as Wednesday. Friday feels pretty much the same as Saturday. In fact, sometimes I tease Anika because she says on Sunday, oh boy, I gotta go to work in the morning. And I just look at her. You know very well that going to work means going from one area of the house to another area of the house.
I didn't say I had to commute.
Now let me say this. Now let me say this. Teasing her, she is actually working. She is actually working. I'm telling you, I am telling you, if you got stock in Zoom, you need to give Anika some money. Because she has had so many meetings over the course of this lockdown where she is literally meeting and supervising her staff. She is literally teaching people in the areas of public health, a critically important area in the era of illness actually confronting the entire swath of humanity right now. And so she is doing that extensively. And she will also tell me on Friday at about 4 o'clock, she'll be like, I'm almost off. And I look at her like this. You know you were sitting in the kitchen. But clearly she is working. So listen, I have to have some fun with her, right? I also have to say, if this is the first Kemetic Ascension, I hadn't even realized that I have been back. I want to say dua to so many of you, too many to count, who reached out to me via text, who reached out to me via Facebook, who reached out to me via my queen. I want to say dua for the healing energies that you sent my way. You know that this condition is scary. There's no other way to describe it. It is scary. I said to my queen, when I realized that something was not right, I felt symptoms. I believe this must have been either March 16th or March 17th is when I began to feel symptoms. And it was sort of a nagging, persistent cough. It was a dry cough. At first it was not a strong cough, but it was consistent. And by the evening of that Wednesday, I believe that was the 18th, I actually was sitting and watching television with Anika, and I looked at her and I said, I think I've contracted COVID-19. And I remember the color, if it's possible, with the sister that is richly melanated. I remember that the color in her face sort of went out, and she said, don't say that. Because I think that having not said it to her before, she thought that perhaps I was watching so much on television that now I was feeling any little inequity, any little imbalance in my body and thinking it was COVID-19. But in fact, I had been thinking that maybe I was coming down with symptoms for 1 or 2 days. And in fact, I was sitting there, and as I breathed, I felt a pain on my right side. It was hard to breathe. I was just sitting in the chair that I do most of my work from. If you've watched me, for example, on Sonnetter, when we're live, you'll see me in my study, the place where I like to believe the magic happens. I was sitting right there, and I felt pain. And so that was when I began to say to her, I think something is wrong. By Thursday, it was clear. By Thursday, I had chills. By Thursday, the cough was uncontrollable. I was very ill. And it got worse over the course of the next week, maybe. My mother would call me regularly and say to me, every day, by the way, I got a little frustrated with her. She would say to me, she'd call me in the morning and say, how are you feeling? And I would tell her. And then she'd call me in the evening and say, are you feeling any better? And I would say, no, and I did not say to her in some instances, I'm feeling worse. But I was feeling worse. And by the 4th or 5th day of her calling in the morning and the evening and saying, aren't you feeling just a little better? I said, Mom, I'm feeling really bad. And she said, well, why aren't you speaking? I said, I'm struggling to breathe. And she just hung up the phone in tears. And I remember my father, who was very ill, in the background saying, what's wrong? What's going on? What's wrong? Because he saw my mother crying. It was very difficult. And I must say that my queen, the chief priestess of the shrine, Anika Daniel Zosaze, Unfraka Ma'at, really took Sekhmet into her person and worked to help me heal. I was out of it. I realized I was out of it because sometimes when I first was beginning to feel better, I would say to her, yesterday when we did this, she said, no, that wasn't yesterday, that was 2 days ago. Or I would say, on Tuesday, she would say, what are you talking about? We talked for a while, she'd say, no, that was Sunday. So I really was losing time. I was extremely listless. I had extreme listlessness. That's the word I'm looking for. And confusion at times. And so this was very difficult. The chills, the fever, the coughing, the listlessness. I had no energy. So little energy that when I would wake up in the morning, sometimes I would feel a little better. And I would get up and go to the bathroom, literally brush my teeth, and be completely wiped out, like I had spent a day, running around the city. Going to the restroom, to the bathroom, would wipe me out entirely. And so this was very difficult, and I must say once again, dua to you all for all of your healing energies. And duau neteru for healing me, and duau neteru for my queen, my wife, who really, really assisted me in coming back to health. I'm still not 100%, but I'm getting there every day. The last week there would have been no way that I could have sung to you off key. Let's just say it that way. That wouldn't have happened. I would not have been able to do that. I still have a cough every now and then, but I am getting close to 100%. And so it's really important.
So we have a few questions from people about how you healed.
Yes.
And I guess I want to make it clear there were no special herbs, there were no special anything. We did not go to the hospital. We tried to,
Yeah.
but when we realized that people going to the hospital ended up being admitted, we didn't think that that was the safest approach.
Well, let me say this a little differently. New York City is actually seeing the kinds of rates in hospital admissions and hospital visits that are unprecedented. And so New York City, the place where we live, the very center of the global impact of the coronavirus, was literally telling people not to go to the hospital unless you were unable to breathe. I had difficulty breathing, but I did not think that my next breath would be stolen from me. And so in that instance, I did not go to the emergency room. Emergency rooms that were completely packed, just as our officials told us not to. I'm going to say to you that Brother Jabari, actually, the thing that I do to pay the bills, you know that this doesn't pay the bills, right? That we do this because the Netzru have told us that this is our task. Because our elder has said that it is our time to bring forward the Kemetic legacy towards our people. One of the things I do to pay the bills is I actually do training for nonprofits and union members. In fact, union members for DC 37 and 1199 primarily. And I'm going to say to you that so many of those people are on the front lines. 1199 is a healthcare union, and DC 37 is New York City's public service union. So you'd better understand that those, I see them on the TV. Anika, I keep saying to Anika, those are people that I've worked with. Those are the people who are the EMTs, the EMS workers, the emergency medical technicians who actually have to come to people's homes and take people to the hospital. The 1199 workers who are working in hospitals and in nursing homes. So many of them are people I work with closely. Some of them are my students. I'm telling you this to say that Jabari has some contacts that would have helped me go into the hospital. And as I spoke with them, sometimes they would say, maybe you should go to the hospital. I was calling them specifically, by the way, to see if I could get tested for COVID-19. I knew that I had all the symptoms, but I wanted to be sure. I'm going to say to you that as sick as I was, we ventured out of the house several times. We called my doctor, our provider several times. By the way, our doctor has still not called me back. Trying to get tested. And I was unsuccessful even getting tested. Some people who are trying to misrepresent me have said that I did not know, I actually don't know whether I've had COVID-19. So let me dispense with this right now. One of the things that we did to try to get healing is we went twice to urgent care here in New York City, the large one called City MD. And in my second visit, the doctor comes into the room wearing, her PPE, her personal protective equipment. And she says, yeah, it looks like with all of your symptoms, this could be two things. It could be the flu. By the way, I have had the flu several times in my life. This was much more difficult than the flu that I had had. But she said it could be a bad strain of the flu that your body is not familiar with, or it could be the coronavirus. So they took the long swab out. They swabbed the inside of my nostril, very uncomfortable, by the way, all the way up, like she was scratching the top of my brain. It really was it was uncomfortable. And so then she took those swabs and she was doing some tests. I did not know that she was not doing a COVID-19 test. She was doing a flu test. I'm really upset about that, by the way. She should have told me what she was doing. Anyway, after about 45 minutes, she came back into the room. And I didn't even recognize her because she came with so much more protection that when she came, I said, first of all, I was startled. And second of all, I said, oh, who is that? This is the same doctor I had spoken to. And she then tells me that she did a flu test because she could not do a COVID-19 test. But she said there were only two things that this could be. your flu test is negative. And so she said, I am writing you a letter which will say that we believe that this is COVID-19 because there were only two things it could be, and we have now ruled out the flu. The flu test is negative. That's the reason why she came back into the room with so much more protection. Literally, she had the splash guard on now. You know, and so this was very difficult. I'm hoping that I will be able to get an antibody test soon. Because you know, as this thing will continue to be in our environment until there is a proper treatment for it, essentially what will happen is eventually, I'm assuming they will test many people who have had the condition to see if they have antibodies that may allow them, because the antibodies are believed to give us limited or maybe more general immunity. By the way, there's some things that are questioning that now that are really scary. But know that if you have general immunity, then there may be some things that you might be able to do that other people will not be able to do. So that's the whole thing. I want to say to you that there are things you can do to improve your immune system. Maybe there's some things you can take to help clear your lungs, but all of those things are not cures for COVID-19. Basically, the only thing that we can do now is try to make sure you're strong if you actually contract it, so that your immune system can eventually fend it off. And that's what everyone is going through. Everyone is going through just that. So we took a lot of vitamin C. I took a little zinc. Those are things that we were hoping were going to boost my immune system. I'm going to tell you that for lots of water, for several reasons. Lots of water. I'm going to say to you that with all of those things, so there were some days I didn't eat. Maybe I had an orange or a mango. That's it for the whole day, because I lost my appetite entirely. And so this was very difficult. Anyway, that's the story of what happened to me. I thought that I'd actually been here for last Kemetic Ascension. I should say to you that I need to also say du'a'u to the Wenwet, to the priests of the Shrine of Ma'at, who put together what the only thing we could call it is an at-home version of Kemetic Ascension and post it. So I need to say thanks to them. I've said thanks to them during initiation and directly to them in the Wenwet training, but I'm really hoping that you all also say thank you to them, because they recognized how important it was for us to come together as a community, and knowing that Jabari was absolutely unable to do that, and that Anika was really preoccupied with trying to bring me back to Seneb, back to health. It was very important that they do that. So I want to say dua to them. So, is there anything else, Anika? Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so let's move forward. I want to do now what we usually call the word from the Seba'it. The word from the Seba'it. And you may know that the Seba'it is essentially, the way that as practitioners of the Kemetic arts, we draw from that bunch of literature that is generally called wisdom literature. And that's what Seba'it means. The teaching text. That's kind of what it means. The Kemetic Seba'it literature is really the world's oldest literature. And so our ancestors developed this important bit of literature to explain to us how to live a divine life, how to live a life in sacred balance. And that sacred balance, of course, we know as Ma'at. And so I will say to you that you don't simply have to listen to people tell you about what your ancestors did. What you should do is read it from them. Today, many of the major texts have also been translated into English. So please make sure you are reading from the sacred bit of literature that our ancestors brought forward into the world in divine excellence. So today, I want to talk to you about the word from the Seba'it. And I want to talk to you about what I have entitled, the title of today's teaching is The Importance of Praising the Ancestors in the Era of COVID-19. The importance of praising the ancestors in the era of COVID-19. First, let me say that I sat on Sonnetter's platform before I was ill. I believe this must have been March 15th or 16th. And I said to Sonnetter that I wanted to talk about the coronavirus. And I said to him that he should expect, that we should all expect, that the coronavirus would be extremely dangerous to the African American and Latino community. He was a bit surprised, and I want to say to you, what I was saying was certainly not prophetic. But what I recognized is our communities are situated in a way that this kind of illness would be even more difficult for us. That this kind of challenge, this kind of ailment would actually be more noxious to people of African descent, to those communities that we can consider in the United States African American, Afro-Caribbean, and Latino. And so I want you to take a listen to this video that was put forward by NBC News's Today program, talking about the challenge that we have. Do you have it there? You have it there? The challenge that...
That's great.
Grab it from the...
I can't do the sound, it echoes.
Yeah, okay. So, but keep in mind, we don't even have to play the sound here. We can play it very low. So, essentially, what I'd like for you to do is listen to this piece from today in New York. It is one of those issues. This is going to go on YouTube later, so I really would like for them to hear it. This is one of those challenging situations. This describes well the impact that is being felt by the African American community.
It's not in here. Let's just do it the way I do it.
Okay. So please take a listen. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to even try to play it from the PowerPoint because we can certainly use more technology. I'm going to play it from the folder so that you're able to hear it very clearly. Here we go. This is on the inordinate impact of COVID-19 in the African American and Latino communities.
Tears an unforgiving path across the country. Numbers show it is especially devastating to one group, African Americans.
When you look at the proportion of people who get into serious trouble and die, again, it's going to be disproportionate towards the African Americans. I do expect that.
Why is the black community getting hit so hard by this?
Well, the black community has been hit by healthcare, poor health for a long time. Pre-existing conditions such as obesity, such as asthma, such as diabetes, hypertension. Now you compound it by this deadly disease. I mean, it's no surprise that we're going to get hit hard.
In Chicago, nearly 70% of virus-related fatalities are black, even though African Americans make up less than a third of the population.
Those numbers take your breath away.
In the epicenter, New York City, 59% of deaths are in Queens and the Bronx, both areas with high black and Hispanic populations.
We're working very hard on the African American community with respect to what's going on because it's not good. I don't like it.
Down south in Louisiana, African Americans, who only account for 32% of the population, make up 70% of the state's deaths.
Those hotspots are in areas of the state that have a disproportionate number of African Americans living there.
Not every state reports cases with a breakdown by race. The White House task force says the federal government is now collecting that data.
It will be public as soon as you get enough data to be able to make a meaningful statement.
Doctors on the front lines see those numbers play out firsthand.
You pass through door after door after door where a patient is fighting for their life on the other side, and almost every single one of them is Black.
Especially hard in smaller communities like Albany, Georgia. In a county nearly 70% African American, it has more deaths than anywhere in the state. Terica Parks is a survivor.
So I was wrapped in a blanket. I'm laying there, gasping for air, and all I'm thinking is, I don't think I'm gonna make it.
People are scared. We're scared. We've never seen anything like this before.
So I want you to understand how difficult this is. Clearly, this is the kind of thing that we haven't really seen in our community. This is, in fact, we haven't seen it anywhere in the world. This is as difficult as it gets, and so many of the people in our community have been entirely beset by this. I know that as I look at Facebook, for example, and I look at the people that I grew up with, the people who I'm close to, so many of the individuals who actually, the parents, the people who raised my friends, my peers, have made their transition. And even some of the people that I've worked with over the years have made their transition during this period of time. It's been very, very, very difficult. So, I want to talk a bit about COVID-19 and our community and put some clarity to this. First of all, I must say, African Americans and Latinos are not more susceptible to COVID-19. African Americans and Latinos are not more susceptible to COVID-19. Now, I want to be clear. There are many, many conspiracy theories. This is not the time to deal with them all. I want you to know that I'm also going to be talking about some of these things on Tuesday evening as I debate someone who is quite popular in our community, Brother Polite. I'm going to be debating him on Tuesday night on Sonetter's platform. And I'd like for you to join me because it's really important as black and brown bodies get taken out of our community in body bags. It is of critical importance for us to actually speak plainly to the truth. And so the conspiracy theories are there. I'm not going to deal with them here, but I want you to understand that some of those people who have been trading in erroneous conspiracy theories for a long time, some of them actually said right before this, it was clear that this was hitting our community more than others, they actually said that perhaps black people were immune to COVID-19. That they were immune to COVID-19. And so I want you to understand that we are absolutely not immune to a virus. Not only are we not immune, we are being attacked by it more than others. The thing that I think is so important for us to understand here is that the large number of deaths of black and brown people is not to do to anything that is genetically biological. It is due to systemic racism. That's what's causing this. Sometimes you might use the term the social determinants of health. That's what folks in the public health field, even like Anika, would say. But Anika knows that when she's saying it to her peers that are not in our community, she needs to also say this is systemic racism. Because sometimes we use these phrases to be and it helps us mask what's really happening. The reason why African Americans and Latinos are struggling is because we live in conditions that lead to a larger number of what are usually called pre-existing conditions. And sometimes some of us have more than one of those pre-existing conditions. Doctors sometimes call that comorbidity. Comorbidity. That not only does someone have diabetes, but they have asthma. Not only does someone have asthma, but they have high blood pressure. Not only do they have obesity, but they have COPD. And so when you look at all of these challenges, African people actually struggle with a larger number of these issues. And so if you have these issues, If, for example, particularly if you have issues that already lower your immune system, perhaps that's lupus or one of those things, it will affect you greater. Something that will affect your airway will affect you greater. A virus might affect you greater. If you have chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, a disease that already takes your breath away, this is even more difficult. If you have asthma, and you know that black and brown people in the hood are affected by asthma, sometimes by things like the existence of more lead paint, sometimes by things like a higher number of pests, vermin in our community because of poor living standards. That sometimes is also something else that seems to lead to asthma, particularly in children. If you're beset by these things, a virus which affects everyone now really affects you. That's exactly what is happening. And now we can layer on that mistrust of the healthcare community. And I want to say very clearly that sometimes when people describe their mistrust, it sounds really ridiculous. Someone said to me that the reason why I survived is because I did not go to the hospital. And I had to say to her, no, I did not go to the hospital because I did not need to go to the hospital. This is a condition that steals your breath. If I could not breathe, what was Anika going to do? Rub me with some peppermint oil? The only thing that she should have done in that instance is called 911 and tried to continue to give me breath. That's all that she could do. That's all she could do. But I know that while what this sister was saying sounds ridiculous, it does have a historical origin. We know that the healthcare institutions and large, powerful structures, even the United States government, have done dastardly things, inhumane things to people of African descent with regard to healthcare. I could cite you the litany of those things. I could cite to you the bad blood experiments in the Tuskegee syphilis experiments that occurred. I could talk to you about the New York City's government testing AIDS drugs on children in foster care without consent. Actually, the city saying that because they were their guardians, technically, by the law, that they gave consent for them to test these drugs on children. I could cite to you the incidents of the many governments around this country, state governments, and even the national government in Puerto Rico, literally taking women's reproductive rights from them unbeknownst to them. I'm talking about forced sterilization. If you want to know about that story, just search for forced sterilization, African American community, forced sterilization, Puerto Rico. If you do that, you're going to see trusted sources describing what the healthcare industry did to us. There are reasons why we are uncomfortable with the health care community. There are reasons. But I want to say to you, family, this condition destroys your lungs. If you cannot breathe, please go to the hospital. This is of critical importance. When you look at the inordinate numbers of people who are dying around the country, black and brown people, many of them are being reported from hospitals. But I already told you that many of the municipalities were telling people not to go to the hospital because they're so overwhelmed. I'm telling you, Anika and I live in Harlem. Every day we hear sirens. I have seen at least 5 individuals taken out of St. Nicholas housing projects right across the street with sheets over their head. I've seen at least 5 people taken out of there dead. Now I'm going to say to you that our community, the Harlem community, already has a lot of systemic racist mechanisms that have prevented us from actually having access to health care. So it's not unusual to see ambulances here. It is unusual to see them in this number and to be regularly taking bodies from from our community. This is scary. By the way, the numbers that we're seeing that are so scary don't generally include people who are dying at home. This is scary. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the conditions that we are seeing. Take a look at this graph that was printed in the Washington Post. The article is called "The Coronavirus is Infecting and Killing Black Americans at an Alarmingly High Rate." They looked at some of the jurisdictions that are reporting race, death, and also race. And look at some of these places. Milwaukee County, Wisconsin. Not exactly some place that you would expect to see a lot of black folk, right? Well, 26% of the people who live in Milwaukee are black. But 73% of the people who have died from COVID-19 are black. Look at DC. DC is made up of 46% African Americans. But 58% of the individuals who have died are African American. How about North Carolina? 21% of the population is African American, but 38% of the number of people who are dying are African American. You heard the Chicago number, 32% of the population, 67% of those people who have died from COVID-19. We can go on and on and on and on. Having all of these pre-existing conditions due to the environments that we have been forced to live in, due to the lack of healthy food, the lack of clean water. Let's not forget about the challenges with lead in our water in so many places like Flint, Michigan, and even Newark, New Jersey. The lack of clean water, the lack of clean air. We live in very urban environments. There's a reason why Brother Jabari tries to have plants in almost every nook of this house. Because I know I live in a very urban environment, and I remember the first summer we lived here, when I wiped the exterior of the windows, you should see what the windows look like. That cloth was literally, that white cloth had turned almost completely dark. So I want you to understand that that is going into our lungs. And so I have plants everywhere, hoping to filter some of that, to help us deal with the lack of clean air in the hood. All of these things mean that we have greater health ailments and even comorbidity, more than one of those ailments, and it means that people are dying. Because then you layer on that the lack of access and mistrust of general health care. This is very, very painful. This is very, very painful. Take a look at these graphs that come to us from the CDC. You can see that black folks have higher rates of high blood pressure, higher rates of diabetes, that we've had more rates of strokes than the folks in the European, in the Tamil community of a similar age. You could even see that African Americans are more likely to die at early ages from all causes. Take a look at this one. From 18 to 34, deaths per 100,000 people, we tend to see 142 deaths in the African American community versus 100 deaths in the Tamil community. And we see something similar from ages 35 to 49. 312 per 100,000 versus 220 per 100,000. And now when you get to the folks who are a little bit more aged, ages 50 to 64, you see 1,046 versus 722. These numbers are really concerning. And the CDC even articulates that some of the social factors lead to this. We see higher levels of unemployment, higher levels of living in poverty, higher levels of no home ownership. In fact, that means not being in complete control of the place where you live. When you see the reports of people who could not see a doctor, absolutely outstretched in the African American community. Higher levels of smoking. Higher levels of people who report that they are not active, and of course, almost as a corollary to that, higher levels of obesity. These things mean that this thing is killing us at a greater rate, then we should be very, very, very concerned. Here are some of the images of some of the people in our community that have made their transition. You're going to see Ellis Marsalis, the patriarch of a family that actually has come forward in excellence. I believe they're from Louisiana. And 3 of his sons, Winton and Branford, are 2 of them. 3 of his sons are excellent jazz musicians. Excellent jazz musicians. World-renowned jazz musicians. Well, the patriarch, their father, died from the novel coronavirus. You're even seeing Des Ann Romaine, a Brooklyn principal who was known to actually be transformative for our children in the Brooklyn community. A young woman made her transition. One of the things that we keep hearing is that the people who are dying are elderly or people with pre-existing conditions. Not as much so in the African American community. We are seeing many of them die. In the middle bottom here, we're seeing, oh goodness, I'm going to forget his name now. This brother here is actually someone who has come forward in excellence in the art world. And so understand that we are also losing people who actually have made great contributions. And I think that what we will realize is when this is all over, that there are so many people. David Driscoll is his name, David Driscoll. What you're going to see is that so many people actually who have made important contributions in our community have made their transition. On the lower left and right are people that I actually knew. I didn't know them well. I knew their children very well. On the right, we are seeing the father of one of my favorite coworkers, someone who I was very, very close to, Erwin Julian, who was like, I mean, if you saw me, you saw Erwin. We were together for several years as we created the Harlem Youth Court. And his father, Joseph, made his transition. On the right, you are seeing the father of a brother that I went to school with, who I've been. He's on the left. I'm sorry, yeah. Joseph Julian is on the left, and on the right. Thank you so much for correcting me, so that folks know who I'm talking about. It is important for us to recognize these ancestors, so I don't want you to confuse them. On the right, you are seeing Brother Baptiste, the father. Frederick Baptiste? Ferdinand Baptiste is his full name. I just call him Mr. Baptiste. But Ferdinand Baptiste, you are seeing the father of one of my schoolmates, Fred Baptiste. Fred was a good friend. He's one of those guys who, I mean, I knew him as a child, I know him as an adult. I've known him for so many years. And he had to announce the passing of his father. I'm sure that there are many, many more names that you know. Please type their names in the chat, because what we're going to do next is we're going to begin to talk about what we do when people become ancestors. What do Africans do? What is our way to respond to people making their transition? So please, if you know of people who have been taken out in recent time, and they don't just have to be of COVID-19, but we know that that is what is killing so many black and brown people right now. Type their names in the chat so that we can remember them. And I want you to write the name ancestor next to them, so that as we call their names, we know that we're calling an ancestor. Anika.
I was saying we also had the brother from Paris Blues in
Yes.
Ireland who passed away.
Yes, the owner of Paris Blues, which is a legendary, well-known jazz cafe here in Harlem, he passed away as well. And I know that so many of my friends would go there for their open mics. He passed away. I think that was announced just this morning. And so many people have made their transition.
And one of my coworkers.
One of your coworkers in the hospital. So many people. So many people. So, what is the Kemetic concept of connecting with those people who have gone on to Taseket Ma'at. How did we view our connection to those people who actually were now ancestors, people who have actually made their transition, people who assisted us in being the people that we are? What is our thought about how we can connect to them? I should say to you first that one of the words that we use for ancestor is Ba'u. Ba'u. Ba'u is one of the names for ancestor. And you'll also hear Jertiu. Jertiu. These are two of the names for ancestor. Now you should understand that in a society that before virtually any other society of record spent as much time as that great nation did recognizing the immortality of the human soul, you should know that we develop mechanisms to recognize not just the transition, how people made their journey into ancestordom, into the great Ba'u. But also, we spent much time describing how we can continue to have an active relationship with those people who have made their transition. And so let's talk about them a little bit now. Take a look at this image. What do we call it? What do we generally call this image where you see someone coming in before the Neteru and then standing in front of the scales and then, if successful, then being brought forward by Heru to see Asar? What are these called? Type it in the chat, please. You know that we generally call these judgment scenes. And this particular judgment scene is of an ancestor named Hunefer. Say the name Hunefer with me, please. This is the way, one of the ways that we believe that we can continue to let those ancestors draw breath, that they can continue to live into immortality. We must continue to say their names. And so you will see right off the bat that Hunefer goes to the Neteru to ask to enter the Hall of Ma'ati. They do not immediately grant him entrance, so then he has to actually be taken by Anpu, the deity that the Greeks call Anubis, in to get his heart weighed. And because his heart is lighter than the feather of Ma'at, his name is spoken by Jehuti or Tehuti, and then Heru takes him to not just greet Asar, but to become Asar. So this is actually a description of how one becomes an ancestor. But I want you to look for a moment at the very top here, where you see Hunefer enter. What do you see in front of him? You are seeing what looks to be a pedestal table with some items on it. You can see some of it is green, so it's likely from the vegetable world. I would argue that it's possible that we're seeing flatbread there as well and some other items. You are seeing an offering table. What many of us would call what? An altar. You are seeing an altar. So right off the bat, when Hunefer enters, he comes with offerings. I want us to recognize that this is not just a beautiful image, not just a description of how we should make our transition, our successful transition, as those who we would call Makeru, or truer voice, those individuals who go into the Rosa Tau, go into Taseket Ma'at, go into A'aru, all names for the afterworld. But I also want you to recognize that the prevalence of the altar in front of Hunefer and others tells us that one of the ways that we continue to connect to the ancestral world, to the divine plane outside of this physical plane, is through making offering. Are you doing it, practitioner of the Kemetic sciences? I speak to people continually who would consider themselves Kemetic people, who would consider themselves practitioners of Kemetic spirituality. And I say to them, when they're struggling with something or they've lost someone, make sure you put this on your altar, and I get crickets from them. I hear nothing back. If you are a practitioner of the Kemetic tradition, in fact, if you are a practitioner of any of the African sciences, you should have at least one altar. In fact, I believe that you should have several altars. Why, I'm going to even tell you, in our home, Anika and I kind of discover altars in our house. What do I mean? I think that if you are a practitioner that responds to the divine energies in Neteru, you actually can feel the eddying and pooling of divine energy in any space that you spend time in. And sometimes what begins to happen is that you begin to lay something here because it feels right. You put a picture there because it feels right. Sometimes then you realize there's a plant there. And then you turn around and said, wait a minute, I made another altar. Not intentionally, but because you were led by the eddying and the pooling of divine energy in a space as you attempt to maintain your space as a sacred space. You have heard me say that Anika actually worked for medical school. She's worked for this particular medical school, SUNY Downstate, for over 20 years.
Today.
What are you saying?
Today is my 20th anniversary.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
But you were there for more than 20 years.
No,
Yeah?
it's 20 years.
Ah, congratulations. I didn't know that.
Thank you.
So understand that she's been working at this place for 20 years. And something interesting has happened. When she got her private space, first she had a table. And I think she might have had, did you have the table there before you had your ankh?
Yeah.
Okay. So she had a table where she brought some things that spoke to her. Because you know that sometimes when you're at work, you need to draw on another power in order to get through the day. You know that what I am saying is in Ma'at. That it is true. I am saying to you that as you do that, sometimes you create these things that help you remember perhaps what you're doing it for. I'm going to say to you that everyone does it, regardless of ethnicity. You know what they often do, Anika? They often have pictures of their family. Because it's a way for them to remember what the heck they're putting up with the madness for. They draw energy from it. They don't realize that what they've done is a rudimentary altar. Well, if you are a practitioner of the Kemetic tradition, you don't just create rudimentary altars, you know how to work in energy and to work in spirit and to also allow your space to return to its divine order. So you should have more. And so Anika first had a table with some things that spoke to her that she liked. Then all of a sudden there's not a lot of light where she put it, so she doesn't have a plant there, but she put elements of earth and then water. And then statues of people of African descent. And then a singing bell. And then when she became a priestess, her ankh sits on that table. It had a beautiful covering on top of it. She created an altar in her office. And I'm going to say to you that her supervisor, someone who she actually had a great relationship with before she retired, her supervisor would just come and talk to her sometimes. And she came in one day with her coffee, and she wanted to put it down so she could show her something. And she put it on that table.
No, she didn't. She got ready.
Oh, she got ready to. And Nika said, oh no, you can't put that there. And the supervisor looked at the table and said, wait a minute, what is that? She didn't actually vocalize that, but she began to realize that this space was different than the rest of Anika's workspace. And in fact, it has become so elaborate, more elaborate than the picture you'll see in a few moments, that it is the image of the altar on our Facebook page. That's not even the altar that we have at home. That's the one that Anika has at work. What am I saying to you, Kemetic? I am saying to you that if you are a worker of spirit, if you are a practitioner of the Kemetic tradition, you should be altering spaces. Because once you create an altar, it will alter your condition. Once you create an altar, ALTAR, it will alter ALTER, your condition. And so you should have altars where you work. That is why you see Hunefer here with an altar. Let's go further. You know that our ancestors argued that not only should you create altars to the ancestors, but that you could have a regular relationship with them. On the left, what are you seeing? You are actually seeing what is usually called by the European a false door. In fact, both of these devices are what the Europeans like to call false doors. I will not use that term because, in fact, you can see that they have simply called it a false door because you or I, individuals who are still based in flesh, cannot go through the door. So that they say it is false because it cannot open and close. But in fact, that is not what is happening. It is not a door for you or I, beloved. It is a door for the person who has made their transition to come and go and to receive sustenance here. This is a spirit door. Do you know how much more powerful it is when you call it what it is? Do you know how language can allow you to truly understand reality? This is a spirit door. And in fact, the one on the left is so magnificent. It is of a 6th dynasty Jati. Jati is usually the term that you will hear. It's similar to a prime minister. Sometimes in Western documents they'll call them the vizier. But we call the title Jati. This is the prime minister of the king Teti. Teti was the king of the first king of the 6th dynasty. This man's name was Mereruka. Say his name with me, please. Mereruka. Mereruka is here in his tomb, and you can see in this spirit door, there is literally a statue of him, not facing in towards the tomb, but facing out. Why? Because you can have interaction with the ancestors. I want to go further for a moment. If you look at this area that has steps, and then something that seems to be a little broken on the top step, you're going to recognize that your ancestors were saying something else as well. In fact, take a look at the spirit door on the right. Less elaborate, but also beautiful. You're even going to see in front of the entrance a small thing that juts out. What are they trying to say there? Well, let's be clear about what they're saying. They are representing, I'm going to go further a little bit, they're representing this image. Can you see the image on the left, Anika? Can you see the image on the left? This is called a hotep or a hetep table. It is an offering table. It is what we would also call an ancestral altar. And so this here shows you that these individuals who are still in the living would have made offerings to their ancestors here. Because I always say, that which you feed is that which lives. That which you feed is that which lives. If there is something or someone that you need in your life, that which you feed is that which lives. If there is something that continues to nag you, that continues to bring you down, that continues to beset you with challenges and inequity, that which you feed is that which lives. Are you feeding those things that you do not want in your life? And are you feeding those things that you do want in your life? That is what the story of the offering table or the hotep table is telling us. In fact, this particular Hetet table is one that was made by the divine Queen T for her husband who predeceased her, Amenhotep III. So it's of critical importance. And you can see that it even tells you that they probably would have put water or perhaps even wine, flatbread. It looks like there's a duck there at the top maybe. You're going to see there's something else in a pot that was here. This is an offering table to the ancestors. And you can see now, can you put this slide back up? You can actually see that this broken item in front of Mereruka is that offering table. Why? Because if you want Mereruka to continue to have access to the physical world, you must feed him. You must be in dialogue with him. You must continue to feed those people who you would like to continue to have a relationship with you after they go into the afterlife. In fact, if it was not clear, take a look at the altar. The spirit door of a man named Neferiu. Neferiu. That's what this person's name is. And you'll see there's even a colorful image of him on the top. And what is he doing at the top there? He's taking sustenance from an altar. Can you see the altar in front of him? He has offerings in front of him. They are telling you that if you want them to be able to walk out of the door, you must continue to feed them. And in fact, there is a line in the Maxims of Amenemhat that says that that individual that feeds your shrine, prefer him to your heir. In other words, that person that continues to give you sustenance in the afterlife, you should see that person as your child, whether they are blood or not. Prefer him to your heir. This is of critical importance. Now, let me say a word about the transition of our ancestors as they go into the afterlife. I want you to be clear that our ancestors actually argued, believed, made the spiritual case that the journey that one would take into the afterlife occurred on the boat of Ra. And so you're seeing an image of Ra here on his boat. Ra was the person that would take you into the afterlife. And so as soon as someone makes their transition, what Jabari does is I like to say a prayer to the soul of the ancestor so that the waters under the boat of Ra may be made smooth, may be made calm, so that the ancestor may successfully make their journey into Taseket Ma'at, the place of those people who lived in Ma'at, along the boat of Ra. That's what I begin with. I light a candle and I speak. I ask for their successful journey. I want to say to you that the boat of Ra is generally called by several names. First of all, generally it is called the Atet. It is called the Atet. You will also hear it called the Menjet or the Manjet. Manjet. And when it is in night, it is usually called, it's still the boat of the million years, but then it is called the Mesektet. It is called the Mesektet. And so understand that this boat, obviously if this is the vehicle that we will be taking to become ancestors, you should be able to call it, shouldn't you? You should know the name. When you go to work on the bus, you don't just take any bus, do you? When you take the train here in New York, you don't just take any train. If you take any train, you don't know where you're going to end up. You had better call the Atet forward for your ancestor. You'd better be able to call it. And so that is why I give you the names that it is known as. Take a look here. You'll actually see that this person was making their transition. They are about to be buried. You're seeing Anpu holding the coffin, or perhaps it should be better called the Neb Ankh of the deceased. You're seeing women cry about this person's death. And you are seeing these priests make offerings to the divine soul. Can you see that the Sem priest, by the way, you know that this particular priest is a Sem priest because he's wearing the leopard cloth. If you actually see Jabari in funerary practices, you will see I will wear the leopard cloth. When you see this priest, you should know that he is doing the final rites of someone. This particular person, once again, is Hunefer. And you see that he is doing what? What is in his left hand? Can you see that? What do you think that is, Anika?
His left hand, I can't see them.
No? Too small. Anika's all the way in the back of the room running the tech. That is actually an incense carrier. And I have said to you, I am going to continue to say that practitioners, particularly priests like ourselves, Anika, we need to bring this device back into existence. Because I have not seen it. I've seen some replicas that you put candles on, but if you are going to do the sacred ceremonies for someone who's made their transition, we need to have this incense burner again. In fact, we need to bring the name of this device back into existence. I have not found the name, and so we must find it. And then you're also seeing that he has what is sometimes called a ewer vase in his hand, and that is the device that contains water for the ancestor to drink. You'll know that today, in many traditions, you see that an ancestor is often given water to drink, cool water to continue their journey. You'll see that in the African tradition, they are both fed and they are given libation. They are given liquid in order for them to make their journey. And you are seeing in between the two priests that are near the mourners and the Sem priest in the back, a large and prolific altar. It seems to have the lettuce that is sacred to men underneath. I think underneath there, Anika, that's probably bread. It could be bread.
Yeah, the round pieces.
I think there are carrots on top of that. Can you see the carrots? And then we see lots of greenery. Lots of greenery. And on top of that, I think we're seeing some bowls that contain some items as well. I even think that if you look at the left bowl, we might be seeing a pineapple. It looks like a pineapple to me. Why am I trying to describe the items on the altar? Because if this is how our ancestors gave sustenance to their ancestors, this is part of what I must do. These are not just beautiful pictures. They are trying to tell you about how they did it when we were at the top of human civilization. Perhaps one of the reasons why we catch in hell in 2020 is because we're not providing sustenance to our ancestors. Sustenance to those individuals who now have divine energy beyond imagination to assist us in the situation that we are in. And so I say that we should cultivate and keep altars to our ancestors, just as our ancestors did. Beautiful image from the papyrus of Hunefer. And then you saw this image before, but I want to just mention something that you might not have noticed on the right. Take a look at this person here. You are actually seeing an African who made their transition, and our ancestors, by the way, in front of him, can you see in front of his feet? What is that? That's another Heltep table. Another offering table. Because what are you seeing? A spiritual symbols depiction of his soul. This particular soul that is depicted with the head of the individual and the bird body is called the Ba. The Ba. And so I want you to recognize that if your ancestors depicted the soul, or at least one of the portions of the soul of the ancestor as their face with a bird's body, they are saying that they can fly. But in order for them to be able to fly out of their tomb and fly back, fly out of the spiritual world into the physical world and fly back, you must give them sustenance. Look at the Hotep table, the Hetep table in front. Please understand, Kemetic, that this is important. If you are a practitioner of the Kemetic sciences and you do not have an altar, then what are you doing? What if you had heard that someone was a Christian and they actually had never had a copy of the Bible? You would find that curious. What if you had heard that someone was actually from the Jewish tradition and they didn't have their rolls of the Torah? They did not in their home have the mezuzah, the item that stands on their doorway. We're going to have a lot of conversation about that at another date. You would say, are you really a practitioner? But they had never seen a yarmulke. They saw someone wearing a yarmulke. They said, look at that little hat. Be like, wait a minute, aren't you Jewish? You don't know that that is a yarmulke? Well, Kemetic, if you are a practitioner of the Kemetic sciences and you don't have altars, what are you doing? We must go further than simply being interested in what our ancestors did. We need to do as they did. And so it is of critical importance for you to see these altars. So let's go a little bit further, and then we are going to construct an ancestral altar for you to see. Take a look at this image. Here are 3 of the divine entities that in the particular situation that we are in, where we are losing so many people to COVID-19, these are 3 deities that I would suggest that you connect on your altar. The one on the left is Sekhmet. She is the Lady of Divine Healing. You see her depicted as a lioness with the sun on her head. She is the daughter of Ra. She is, Sekhmet, actually her name means she who is powerful. She will knock out inequity. She is fiery. She is fiery. So she is one of the deities that I suggest you connect with. In the middle, who are you looking at there? Aren't you looking at one of the Mesu Heru, one of those devices that we have heard misnomered by the Greeks as canopic jars? Well, this particular deity is Hapi the baboon. Well, why did I show you Hapi in this instance? What does Hapi contain? The lungs. So I would suggest that you connect with Hapi in this instance. That you particularly make offerings to Hapi. And then on the right, you are seeing an individual who was amongst the living, who made his transition and was considered a divine ancestor. This is that divine healer, architect, engineer, priest, and poet known as Imhotep. Imhotep was the individual who people beyond Kemet's time in excellence continued to make offerings to. They would go to tombs and temples, not tombs, temples consecrated to Imhotep and ask for healing. So please understand that Imhotep, being one of the world's first recorded healers or doctors, should also be an individual that you connect with. And so, let's get to the altar. Let's get to the altar. I want to talk a bit about specifically today ancestral altars. But much of what you're going to hear me describe also is applicable to your general altar, the altar that you're actually simply looking to pull divine energy, the energy of the Neteru, into your life. I should say to you that there are some practitioners that believe several things about ancestral altars versus your practical altar. There's some people who believe that the ancestral altar and the altar for the Neteru should be separate. I don't necessarily believe that, but I do understand why they might say it. Because one of them is the working altar where you're looking for energy from the Neteru, and the other is the altar that is in some ways your walkie-talkie to your divine ancestor. It is the place where you communicate with them. And if you have two different sorts of altars that allow you to do that, there can be some power in it. I've already said to you that Anika and I have several altars in the house. I think I've counted at last count maybe at around 7 altars in the house. And it is so important for you to recognize that you can use altars for different purposes. And this is of critical importance. So once again, you're seeing an image of, this is an early version of the altar that Anika has at work. So let's create an another thing about ancestral altar, I should say. Some people also believe the ancestral altar should not be in your bedroom. I don't agree with that either. But I do want to let you know that these are things that you will hear. I do not agree with that either. I think that if I am connecting with an ancestor, why would my bedroom be a problem? What, am I afraid that they're going to speak to me in my sleep? I want them to speak to me in my sleep. So, often when you develop an ancestral altar or any sort of altar, usually it is believed that items that are natural are best. Is this clear, Anika? Back up? Too close? Items that are natural are usually considered best. Back up? I'm not going to be able to walk.
Okay. I'll move the camera up. That's fine.
Yes? It's usually considered that items that are natural, I'm going to move a little bit, that items that are natural are best. So you can have an altar made of metal. Metal is natural. Of wood. I like wood. Some people even try to make them out of glass because glass is made of sand. And so understand that those sorts of things that belong to the natural world can be beautiful. There's going to be things on it, right? Okay. So this particular altar that we're going to make is made out of a beautiful stool. This is a Ghanaian stool. And you'll actually see it is a beautifully carved stool out of wood. You're going to see in the center the symbol that is known as the Jinyane. This is an Adinkra symbol that means that God, that the Neteru are omnipresent and omnipowerful, omnipotent. So, I love this for the base of our ancestral altar here. Now, one of the things that you might want to begin with is with a covering for your altar. And so we're going to actually use, in this instance, you'll notice the prevalence of the colors red and orange here. Why am I doing that? Why do you think I'm doing that? Ideas? Well, in this instance, I am trying to also invoke the fiery energy of Sekhmet. And so that is why I am using those particular colors in this particular altar. Now let me say to you that we've already cleaned the altar, but if we were going to continue to clean it, please use some plain soap and water. Don't use things that are caustic. Sometimes people even use a bit of Florida water. Florida water is just nothing more than citrus water that has flowers in it and a little alcohol. It is a good thing to clean things with. So you can clean your ancestral altar. This is Florida water here. You can make your own Florida water as well. Often you would use certain devices to clean your altar. And in fact, the other thing that you will also hear is that people also make their own altar oil. And so here I'm going to use a bit of Moroccan rose, just a little bit. Or should I use the Egyptian musk, Anika? Which one would you prefer today?
The Moroccan oil.
The Moroccan oil. I want you to understand that this one is a little bit lighter, so I'm going to actually just spray it on the jinyame here. One of the reasons why you want to do this is because clearly you want your altar to be clean, to be smelling great. Sometimes the oils are oils that are connected to the particular tradition that you're in. But if you are working the space, you're going to make sure the space is clean, right? You're going to make sure that you have given offerings to the ancestors. And I think that this particular runner is beautiful. So I'm going to put this in the middle. And now what else might you want? You might want things that are connected to the elements, right? So how about we start with a plant? How about we put a plant on the altar? Now, depending on where you would have your altar in the room, you might even want to consider to put the elements according to the cardinal points, northwest, east, and south. We're not going to do this here because this is a moving altar that we're creating in front of you. But you might want to consider doing that as well. We also are going to put this wonderful incense burner. By the way, why the incense burner? What are we seeing in the incense burner? I'm going to put this closer here. What is that symbol in the middle of the incense burner? That symbol is a symbol for Hetep, or offering, or peace. So that is why we love this particular incense burner that was made by this incredible brother that works in stained glass called Ross Lyon here out of New York. And so we have our incense burner. I also want to have an item that I can burn other things in. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. So this is an abalone shell. Many practitioners use this, especially if you're going to burn something or put fire in it. It's a really good thing. And it has a hand-carved African base. I also want you to know that my mother is from Guyana. I consider myself part Guyanese. Often when we are dealing with the ancestors, we provide them spirits. It's a liquid that evaporates. It's a good analogy for the ability to go from physical to ethereal. That's one of the reasons why we use spirits. But I like that we're going to put El Dorado Superior Demerara rum, a Guyanese rum, on the altar. I like that too. Put this here. I'm even going to put some images of the divine here. So you know that we're making a Sekhmet altar, right? Here's Sekhmet. I'm going to put Sekhmet here. Is she leaning too much? I'll put her here. I'm also going to have an image of an ancestor here. This is a Neb Ankh that has been misnomered the sarcophagus. We do not use the word sarcophagus. It actually is what the Greeks called them. They called it a flesh eater because they did not understand what they were looking at. And when they opened them, they saw bodies that looked a little bit shriveled. And so they believed that the flesh was being eaten. Of course, we understood that these were vessels for the eternal transition of our ancestors. So I'm going to put that there. And I like this one because it opens. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with that in a few moments. Be creative. There's nothing that says that I had to put that there. I'm going to also put an image of Imhotep here. I like Imhotep being here. I'll put something so he's a little bit more level. Because once again, he is a healer, and we're looking for healing. This is our COVID-19 altar. I'm going to put a vessel here for water, because usually what we want to do is we want to feed and quench the thirst of the ancestor. Here what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to put the water in yet. I'll put that in when I'm doing the prayer. But this is the water that we return from the Hapi, from the river misnomered as the Nile every year. So I'm going to put this water in here to quench the thirst of the ancestor. And I'm going to put a few stones or crystals, which in some way, once again, also represent the natural world. Here. And I also like them there because they are the color of fire. One of them actually is not the color of fire. This one is actually Moroccan jasper. I love this particular stone because of the concentric circles that naturally occur on it. To me, it's a good description of the layers of our life, of the eternalness of our life, the fact that time is much more of a spiral than it is singular. I like Moroccan jasper on my particular altar. Once again, feel comfortable with what you want to use. I also want to feed the ancestor. So I have brought here a mango. Make sure it's clean. It doesn't have stickers on it, all of the good stuff. I'm going to put a mango here. Well, can you see it here? I'll put it here. I'll put a mango here and an avocado here. Why did I put two different pieces of fruit? Because I'm going to tell you, I love mangoes. But Anika is not that party to mangoes. She likes avocados more. So I want to make sure that it represents us in that sense. And also a candle, because one of the things that we would likely do. Now look, this is a simple white candle that you can get in a lot of different places. Now, if I was going to spend a little bit more time here, what I would normally do, and I've done in other altars, is I would paint some symbols here. What symbol would I paint? Depends on what I'm trying to access. You should probably have lots of candles. Because when you light the candle, it's going to help invoke a particular energy within you. And if you've painted a symbol here that represents what you're trying to get, this could be absolutely important as well. So here's a good working ancestral altar. You'll note that there are some other things that you would likely include. I would probably include also some items. Let's say that you're speaking to a particular ancestor. You should put something that represents them on your altar. So let's say, for example, what you're attempting to do is you are actually going to speak to a grandmother or a grandfather. Do you have a comb or a brush from them? That's a very intimate item. Maybe your grandfather's razor, very intimate item. You can still also feel free to put a picture of a particular ancestor here. I didn't do that because some of those things were in other places in the house, and I did not bring them down for this. But I want you to recognize that that's also something that you can do. Is there something that an ancestor liked? Let's say my Aunt Hazel, actually, Jabari is a vegetarian, but she was not. She used to love her some ham hocks in her collard greens. Maybe I would put a ham hock here. I might actually do that because it's for her, right? I want to make her happy. Now, Jabari would probably more put the collard greens there and leave the ham hocks out. But don't be surprised if when you're sleeping, she comes to you and says, "You know I didn't eat no greens that way. What's wrong with you, boy?" You're trying to please the ancestor. This one is not your Neteru altar. This is the ancestral altar. So you could do that because you want to make sure that you are creating a space that is sacred to the ancestors so they feel comfortable. Let me say something else about this really quickly, by the way. I remember when my mother took me to Guyana when I was very, very small. And we went to my aunt, an aunt that helped raise my mother, an aunt that actually was so important to my mother that when my mother came to the United States, she left her daughter, my older sister, there with her. And when we went there, it was unfortunate that we got there after her husband, another important relative, had already made his transition. And so when I got there, my aunt, who didn't have a lot of money, actually created a table for us to eat. You'd figure that's what she would do, right? At the front of the table, she had the big piece of roti. At the front of the table, she had the big piece of curry chicken. Why? Because she was feeding her husband. Now, my aunt might not have said, I don't know if she would have said this because I was too young when she passed. I don't know if she would have said that she was an African. But you know what? To some degree, the names are less important. She was doing something extremely African. And so this is really important for us to recognize. So now I'm going to activate my altar. I'm going to do some things for it. First of all, let me just pray to call the ancestors. I'm going to say, ancestors, I call you into this space. Ancestors, I have attempted to provide for your sustenance, to quench your thirst. I ask to be in divine communication with you on this day. I ask that you come here so that we may continue our relationship. I know that death is not the end of your life, and I ask that we continue our divine relationship. I ask that you move forward to the Neteru as someone, an entity that is closer to the divine. I ask that you make a petition on my behalf to the Neteru. I ask for your strength and my strength together. Divine ancestor, I provide you a sweet mango. Divine ancestor, I provide you a ripe avocado for your sustenance, and waters from the Hapi so that you will be quenched. Now the ancestors can drink. I'm also going to say that one of the things that you might do, sometimes what I think is really a great way to recognize all of those people that passed, is here what you can do is write the name of the ancestor on a piece of paper that you keep someplace on the altar. I am going to write here, Hazel Smith, who was my great aunt, who was almost like my grandmother, someone that was very important to me. My aunt who recently made her transition, Vera Daniels. And I'm not trying to bother Nika or make her cry, but I'm going to put the name of her father, Richard Daniels. Her mother, Evelyn Daniels. These are just some of the names of the ancestors that you can mention. Now,
Patty Collins.
Yes, Patty Lou Collins, her grandmother. I wasn't sure if Anika was going to get down because she doesn't want to cry right now. Martha Robb, so I was going to leave her alone. But
You
she's
started
felt,
it.
yes, she's felt comfortable doing this, which is wonderful.
And GB.
And our cat, oh my goodness, she's putting our cat on here. Okay. So, these are some of the names. Maybe you can have a small book. You remember those little memo pads we used to have?
Sylvester.
Yes! Oh, how could I forget? Eslyn Sylvester. Who was my aunt, who was a very important person in my life. Very important person. What you might want to do is continue to have this small piece of paper, or maybe even a book where you can write the names of those people who have become ancestors. I'm going to roll this. I would normally wrap this with a little piece of ribbon, but what I'm going to do, because of how we constructed this altar, is I'm going to put this paper into the Neb Ankh. And this is a good time for us to light our candle. There we go. And let me say something else. Often what you are doing is you are giving something to the ancestor that actually means that you recognize their contribution. You are in some ways paying it towards them. In some ways you are giving something that means something to you. That was not simple for you to give them. You see the food. Now, of course, we're going to eat this food later, right? We're not going to just let it actually spoil on the altar. That would be a bad idea. But we're going to also, in addition to that, we're going to give something to the ancestor that recognizes that we understand that they paved our way. In some ways that they paid our way. You're going to see some of the more modern altars even include what is called ancestral money. Now, sometimes people go and they buy ancestral money on the internet. It's usually made out of what's called joss paper. I'm not going to do that because those pieces of paper don't have black folks on them. I actually preferred that what I was going to do is I printed some Ethiopian money, I printed some Ghanaian money. So in some ways what I'm doing is I'm paying the passage for our ancestors to return to our homelands. That is what I am doing here. That's the way that I view it. And usually this sort of money would be burned. So I'm going to ancestor. We recognize that you are making a journey. We recognize that that journey must be paid. We recognize that your work, your commitment, your legacy is payment more than anyone could imagine. But here we recognize that your journey was not made without cost. We recognize that as you make your transition, we make our transition. And that we are pleased that you can return to our homeland. With this, I provide some of the cost of your journey. And so I am lighting some printed money. This is not actually worldly money. It looks like Ghanaian money, but it's not actually Ghanaian money. You see, I'm putting it in the abalone shell because the shell itself is good for things that are burning. It will not burn easily. And then here's the Ethiopian money. Anika particularly wanted, because Ethiopia is a place on the continent that we truly love. She wanted for there to be, and be careful with flame, by the way. You know it is flame, right? Be careful with flame. Make sure that, I'm just telling you to be careful with flame. While forgetting that we actually have a fire alarm right above us. It's funny that I forgot that because we regularly do what I'm going to do now, burn incense here. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to burn incense. And when I say be careful with flame, be sure that you remember that it is flame. I know that once you become a worker on your altar, you might get to the point where you do it very comfortably. But make sure that if you have a flame, if you have a candle, if you have incense, if you have ancestral money, that you're monitoring it. Because I certainly know of at least one practitioner who burnt down his house because he forgot the candle that was lit. So please remember. By the way, this is a practitioner you all know. I'm not going to tell you who. But know that it is important for us to light incense, not only because of the scent, and because you see our ancestors did it regularly, but also because it is the element of air. It is the element of spirit in this instance as well. So we light incense as well. And so I'd simply sit here for a moment. I'd kneel. I'd speak to specific ancestors. That I'll do quietly and privately for a moment. what you want to do here is you just want to make sure that your ancestors have been fed, have been spoken to. Because remember, that which you feed is that which lives. That which you feed is that which continues to persist. If these individuals were important to you, if these individuals work towards your sustenance, work towards your ability to exist, always look for the best from you, I want you to remember that you must continue to maintain your relationship with them. And in addition to that, also remember that death is not the end. You saw the bobbird, you saw the spirit door. Death is not the end. And if you believe death is not the end, you must continue your relationship. So it is of critical importance for you to do that. Why, understand that your ancestors are more powerful now than they ever were in physical form. In physical form, they were limited in their ability to reach you. They were limited in their ability to walk before you, to walk behind you, to make sure that all inequity is taken out of your way and that your steps are made plain. But as ancestors, there is no limit. So continue to speak to them. And I say in the era of COVID-19, I say in the era of illness that is besetting our community, that I'm asking our ancestors, both new and old, to maintain their relationship with you. That the only reason why we have sorrow is because we forget that you are still here. Well, today I am absolutely pronouncing that you are in this space. I am absolutely pronouncing that your death is nothing more than you shedding a physical shell. And so I say, thank you, dwa, dwa, dwa'u, to the ancestors. I remember you, that the ba'u are real and are here. Please don't forget, if you are a practitioner of the Kemetic arts, it is important for you to get in your altar. If there are things that you're working on, individuals, powers, entities, individuals, ancestors, that you are continuing to communicate with, you must communicate with them. This is of critical importance. With that, I want to say that the divine force in me greets the divine force in you. Dwa'u, 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 for being here on with us for Kemetic Ascension. Anika, can you come forward and help us with the final affirmation?
So one tradition that we learned when we, I'm sorry, I stand in front of you.
No, you're fine.
When we were in the Shrine of Ptah, is that you never put your back to your altar. So that's why you saw me move the way I did, so that my back never faces the altar. Sometimes it's a little difficult in our space. You might see us do that unintentionally, but it's always best to face your altar and make sure that they recognize that you recognize them at all times. And since our ancestors are very important, you never want to put your backs towards them. So I also want to acknowledge Baba Heru, who entered the room.
Oh, dwa'u, dwa'u, dwa'u.
It was so good to see you online today. And twa'u to everyone who's online. I know that this is a difficult time, but we are going to make it through. We have our tools. We have our Kemetic tools. We know what we need to do. And it's important during this time to really use your altar, not just have an altar, but to use it. And that's why Jabari talked today about how to activate it. So it's nice to have it in your house, but it's not just there for decoration.
If you're using this decoration and not using it, it's a table with some cute stuff on it. An altar is a process, not a thing.
Exactly. So each day you should be tending to it. You need to refresh the water. You need to make sure that you change the fruits. If you want to change the different scents of types of incense that you use, the different smells that you use, you could change some of the interu on the altar table. It doesn't have to be stagnant. So you can always update and change and work. It's about doing the work. It's a process, as Brother Jabari has said, Hemnetter has said. So please make sure that you're doing the work. Call the names of your ancestors. Talk to them. Let them know what you want to hear. Ask them the questions that you have on your mind. I always tell people that I get my answers in my dreams. So I'm not sure how your ancestors speak to you, but whenever I have questions that need a response, I always tend to make special attention to my dreams. And for those of you who always say, well, I never remember them when I wake up, I was also taught by Queen Afua, when you have your dreams, make sure you have a journal next to your bed. So that as soon as you wake up, you jot down as much information as you can remember from your dream. And it'll help you try to analyze your thoughts and to see what answers you may have received in your slumber. So with that, I wanted to offer you the final affirmation for today's Kemetic Ascension. We're going to stand in the pose of adoration, and we're going to say, please repeat after me, Rupu Nuku,
Rupu Nuku,
Amiku,
Amiku,
Kemam,
Kemam,
Keperu,
Keperu,
and Unter,
and Inter,
Hayu.
Hayu.
I am that I am,
I am that I am,
a shining being,
a shining being,
dwelling in the light,
dwelling in the light
of the Most High.
of the Most High.
Twa'u Unter,
Twa'u Inter.
and Twa'u to all of you for being with us. Thank you so much for those of you who've already made donations. For those of you who are interested in donating to the Shrine of Ma'at and want to continue to support the work that we do, please do so via Cash App, which is $ Shrine of Ma'at. That's our handle. Or you can do it through PayPal, and you can use the email address ma'at@shrineofma'at.org. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Peace, Ankh and Ma'at.